G'day there everyone, Daniel Anderson here. Now, crawled properties and managed properties are the focus of today's video, and why and how we would use these and why they're important, how they're created, and how we actually manage both of these in your SharePoint environment. And look, to be honest, these are fundamental concepts that we need to understand in relation to creating search experiences across SharePoint. Now, before we dive into crawled and managed properties, there's a few other little bits of terminology that I do want to just cover off, make sure we're on the same page so that we do have a good understanding of when we do use these terms, what they actually mean. So the first thing we're going to need to understand is the term metadata. Now, metadata means information about something. So in SharePoint, it usually is information about documents, about pages, and about list items themselves. So if we think of a policy, for example, a policy might have associated metadata of expiry date, policy type, document owner. So those three pieces of information are what we call metadata. That metadata is associated or information about a policy. Then we've got a site column. Now, a site column is a metadata column on a list or a library that's been created that we need to reuse across the entire site collection. So that means we can create one column or one site column and then use that and reuse that column across different lists or libraries in the same site. Now, that is a little bit different to that of a list column. Now, a list column is specifically added to a particular list or a particular library. It can't be reused across multiple lists or libraries. We then move into a crawled property. Now, a crawled property is content and metadata that's extracted from an item, so a document or a list item. So things like, that metadata that we just spoke about, that they then become what we call a crawled property. Now, to include the content and metadata of crawled properties so that we can use those in search experiences and make those part of what we call the search index, we need to map these crawled properties to what we call managed properties. So there's two different types there. There's crawled properties where they're initially created from the metadata and extracted from the content. We need to map those and associate those to what we call managed properties. Managed properties can have a larger number of settings and attributes, and these attributes can determine how the contents are shown inside of our search results. So the search schema also contains those attributes of the managed properties and the mapping between those crawled properties as well. So a little bit about the search schema here. So when a user searches for content in SharePoint sites or across multiple SharePoint sites, search only finds what's in this search index and only shows the results that the user has permission to see. So remembering, in any search experience, it is security trimmed and users will only see the content that they have permission to see. Okay, so that leads us on to the demonstration and how the concepts we actually create and manage crawled properties and managed properties. So we can see here that I am in a SharePoint site. I've got a finance topics list here. Now, we've got, as we know, when we create a list, we've got a default set of columns that we do have added to a list. Now, I've gone ahead and already added a couple of columns here. So we've got topic, we've got date, and we've got owner. Now, these are what we call list columns. So these have been added by adding this, using this add column option here. So we can click add column and then we can add a different column to this list. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another column. Now I'm going to choose a choice column here, and I am going to choose name this column functional area. And I will say IT, I will say finance, I will say HR, and we might even say legal here. So these are our functional areas. So what I've done now is I've created what we call a list column. Now let's just add a little bit of, we'll set some data, set some values here in these lists, in this column here. So we'll just add a couple of different things. Now, what needs to happen here though is things need to be crawled and indexed. All right. So SharePoint has what we call an index. So there's a crawl schedule. So if we think of things like Google, when new pieces of content get created, there's a number of different processes that happen. New content gets crawled, it then gets added to what we call a search index, right? So that's the same type of concept happens here inside of SharePoint. Now that we've added a new column, we've added some data to that column, this needs to get crawled and it needs to get picked up as a new column. So what we can do though is make sure, and we can trigger and make sure that this site or this list gets added, so the next time that the crawl happens, we can mark this to get indexed. So I am going to jump into the site information section here, and we can go to view all site settings, and then under the search and offline availability here, we can see that we've got this option to re-index this site. So marking this site for re-indexing will enable this site to be picked up during the next scheduled search crawl. So that's what we want to happen, because what's going to happen is that new column that we've just added is going to be crawled and become a crawled property. So remembering back, we want to then use that crawled property or make use of that new column in our search experiences. Now to do that, again, we need to map this crawled property to a managed property. All right, so what we're going to do now is we are going to go into what we call the search schema. All right, now this is the search schema for this site collection in question. All right, so just for this particular site. So you can see here that we are now in the site collection administration, and we are in the managed properties section of the search schema. We also have this crawled properties section here as well. All right. So initially, that new column that we called functional area will be a crawled property. So let's just have a look, and we'll do a quick search here and see if we have our crawled property available yet. So we'll do functional area, but it's not there yet. All right, so let me just jump back onto this list, and I'll just make sure that I've got the right, I do. So one other one that we can check, because this has already been done, is we can check our topic, right? So we've got a column here that we've called topic. And if I look at and look for this crawled property, you can see that I've got this crawled property called OWS_topic. Now, you'll also notice that this has already been mapped to what's called a managed property called refinable string 00. Now, Microsoft give us a lot of blank and ready to use managed properties that we can then use to map our custom crawled properties, or any crawled properties that we create or we have. We can map those to these blank placeholder managed properties, because what we can see here is that out of the box we have a stack of different managed properties that are created for us just out of the box. So if I look for something like department, which is already a pre-existing managed property here, we can see here that this is an out of the box one. We can see the properties of this managed property here. We can see that it's queryable, it's retrievable, it's refinable, but it's not sortable, right? Now we could, if we wanted to, we can map many different crawled properties to a single managed property. Now, where that might come in handy is something like department. So let's say that we have different business areas across our company. They might use a column in their lists or libraries for department. They might have functional areas. They might term things a different way, but they've got similar values or similar options in those columns. So they become crawled properties, but we could map those different crawled properties to a single managed property here called department, and then we could use a combination of all of those crawled properties in our search experiences. So if we think of a refineable panel in a search on a search page, we could have all of those values combined under a single managed property. So let's jump back into crawled properties and let's have another look and see if we've got our crawled property that has appeared yet. So we'll just jump back into here now, and we can see here that we do now have this crawled property. So that has now been picked up. What we want to do now is we want to map this crawled property to a managed property. And we want to use that in a search refiner. So if I show you where we're going to use this, if I jump back onto this finance list, I've got a search page here that's already been set up for us. All right. So I've got a search box. I've got a filters panel. Now I'm just going to change the display of this to show cards. All right, so I'll just change this to cards. I'll republish this. Now on the left hand side, what we've got here are our refiners. Okay, so here is where we've got our topics refiner. So if I go back into manage properties, I'm going to look for what we call refinable string. Now this refinable string 00, you can see that it has already been mapped to the topic crawled property, or the crawled property of topic has been mapped inside of refinable string. So I'm going to use refinable string 01. Now we can see these attributes here. We can see it's a text, we can see it's queryable, it's retrievable, it's refinable, it's sortable. All right, exactly what we need. So I'm going to open up refinable string 00, and you can see that we've got all our attributes here. Now if I scroll down to the bottom, we can add a mapping. So I'm going to add a mapping here, and I'm going to look for our crawled property, which was called functional area. So I'll call this functional area, and I'll find this crawled property, and I'm going to add that as a mapping to our refinable string 01. All right, so now when I click OK, we still, again, because we've changed this, we need this to then get picked up. So the changes need to be picked up and crawled and associated and all that sort of stuff. So I'm just going to jump in, and I will just mark, and I'll go back to site information. I'll go back to view all site settings. I'll go back to search and offline availability. And I'm just going to mark this site for re-indexing again. All right, so we'll go re-index this site, and we'll click OK. So that's been marked as re-index, as ready to re-index. So now what we want to do is, now that we've mapped our crawled property to a managed property, we want to make use of that in a search experience. Okay, so I'm going to go back into, and if you need a refresher on how this was set up, there is another video that was previously done about how to use, these are called the PMP search web parts. So there is another video which I will link to. It should pop up in the as a card up there too, but I will post that the link to that in the comments below as well. So we want to make use of this new managed property inside of these refiners. All right, so I'm going to edit this page here. Now the first thing we want to do is go to the search results. Now we want to also select that property. All right, so we want to select that refinable string 01. So if I go into the options here, we should see, if I scroll down a little bit here, we will see shortly, we will see refinable string 01. So let me just refresh this page a little bit. And now what we will have, if I jump into the properties and we'll go to selected properties, let's have a look for, if I keep scrolling down, Keep scrolling down. We haven't got that appearing yet. Let me just go back. We've lost it. Let me just go back. Let's have a look through the list here. All right, so that's taken a little bit of time just to get picked up in the next crawl. So what we do have now is if we go to selected properties, and now what we will have is the option to select our new refinable string 01, which is there. So we've already got refinable string 00 and refinable string 01 now as well. All right, so we can now republish that, but I just want to show you, especially in this search result, the PnP search results, one of the templates here is the debug template. And you can see that what that gives us is what is returned for each result. So we can see here that we are returning these properties. So we've selected 01 and 0, and you can see all the other properties that we do have that have been selected and are being returned as part of those search results as well. All right, so it's a good way to check. So I'm just going to flick back over to cards. Now what we're going to do is in our search filters, we are going to customize our filters. So you can see here we've got topic, we've got a filter field of refinable string 00. Now this one here, we want to set another refinable field here. So let's call this one functional area. And we will select the refinable string 01 this time, which is this one here. Again, let's use a checkbox. We'll expand it by default, and let's allow multiple values, and we'll choose the operator as an OR operator here, and we'll click on and save. So we'll hit republish. And now what we'll have is our 6 results, but now what we've got are 2 refiners on the left-hand side. We've got topic and also functional area. So what that allows us to do now is actually combine our filtering or our refining. So you can see we've got topic, functional area. Now, if I hit the edit button and edit the search filter properties here, we can see that we can use the operator to use in between our filters. So we can choose or and. So I'm going to choose the and flick it over to and I'll republish. And let's have a look and see what happens here. So what we can see is if I select budgeting, and that will bring back 3 results here, but you can see we've got 2 functional areas that the budgeting topic spans across. So if we wanted to narrow this down to finance, we can say select finance, and now we've knocked off 1 result because that was relating to IT, and we've now got functional area set to finance, and we've got our 2 results there, and we've combined budgeting and finance in the refiners and the search results are coming back accordingly. So using managed property, the managed properties are what we need to use inside of our search experiences that we do create. And there is a difference between the crawled properties and the managed properties. And as we saw, what we need to do is when we create columns in a list or a library, they become and they get crawled and become crawled properties. But what we really need to do if we want to use those in our search experiences from a search perspective is then utilize managed properties and map our crawled properties to our managed properties, and then we can make use of those managed properties in our search experiences. So I hope that brings you some value today. Crawled properties versus managed properties. It's something that is good to understand if you are looking at your search and creating those custom search experiences.